Welcome back to the next video in our series. We'll be going the advanced Separatist tier listing today. This will be more in line with what the current meta is and what you expect to see in a lot of core Separatist lists. There are a lot of janky Separatist lists which can catch a lot of people off guard, but I'll make note of those units as we go along. Alright, so starting off with the humble B1 battle droid. B1 battle droids are an easy A. Part of the faction identity is the B1 for Separatists. B1's found in 90% of lists unless you're going for more of a B2 skew, but even if there's B2s, there's usually a few B1s in there. They can be spec'd into generally a support squad with either repair bots or medics, although the repair bots are generally on the B2s if you're going to splurge for them. B1s form an integral part of the Separatist list simply because they allow you to have order control. Order control in the Separatists is entirely important because it gives you, if you do it correctly with B1s, can give you perfect order control in your bag as well. So you could have 2 operatives or 2 commanders in there, or maybe you can make it a little dirty and take improv orders and be able to fish out what you need when you need it. You can occasionally see them in some big squads, but generally in the top meta lists, you're going to find these guys are going to just be either run naked or with 1 support piece of weaponry or just the humble E5C, the 3 black attack dice, and they just add their points value compared to every other core in the game. They rank above them, so that's why they're ranked so high. Droidicas are very unique for Separatists in the fact that they obviously can go speed 3 and they're a vehicle, and you can hide. They are line of sight blocking, so you can hide a lot behind them. They are in a solid B tier. A lot of lists tend to throw them in right at the end. You'll find lists that are more centric around them don't do very well. They're more of just an add-on to give you extra flexibility with your objective play or with any of the missions like which one is it? Destroy enemy base or capturing fire objectives like recover the research is another really good one for droidicas because they can reach those outlying objectives. However, like I said, you can't really build a solid list around them. They're always in addition, and in the support slot, it is a highly contested slot because you obviously have your crab droids, you have your spider droids, and you have stabs. Not that you'll ever take stabs when you got all these other choices. Droidicas' special mention should be that they can make a lot better use of the new, I think it's the one that gives sharpshooter, the new upgrade to other units shooting near them. Yes, they can be engaged easily, but the luxury of being a ground vehicle is that you can always just walk out and still get benefit of it, and obviously since there's 2, you can spread them out and get a lot bigger radius of the range 1 from that unit. General Grievous, for newer players, he's a very solid pick because he's very forgiving. His command cards, 2 of them are mediocre. His 1 pip doesn't really know what it wants to be, whether it's a dive card or a runaway card. His low courage really hinders him, but his 2 pip, especially in B2 lists, can make or break the game at certain intervals, being able to just spring up onto your opponent or jump onto an objective with a whole bunch of core, but those lists are kind of gimmicky, and you need to take massive amounts of cores to take the most benefit of it. Unfortunately for advanced players, you rarely see him. He's probably a low B to a high C. For this one, I'm just going to put him down in a C. Generally, as lightsabers go, he's mediocre. If you're going to invest the points, you might as well take Ventress or Maul and use a super tactical instead to go around that route. But he does have some play with the jank with the Ruthless card. Now, Ruthless is very, very powerful and it shouldn't be dismissed. But generally speaking, if your opponent sees it and you can make sense of all the core troopers, you know when the Ruthless turn is coming and you can play around it. So his biggest weakness is that he's really waiting for his next update, which will be when he comes on his motorbike with his little Magna Guard or BX droid bodyguard, and he'll be able to get hopefully some new command cards there as well to help him out a bit, and maybe they'll rework his 1 pip to make a bit more sense as well. Count Dooku. Count Dooku in a good player's hand is a very high A to a low S. He's definitely not the top of the S list, and that might aggravate some Separatist players. But I'll explain why. Dooku is still very points intensive and very telegraphed. Yes, he has cunning, but it's very obvious when you're going to be using those cards. And yes, he can manipulate movements and different ranges and stuff, but when he's outshone by a lot of other Jedi or Force users that occupy the same slot. So if you want to, Anakin will generally beat Dooku with the double attack. He can do the same thing as Ventress and, ignore their immune pierce and make sure he fishes through that one wound. But he's got a very low attack pool as well, unless you're using his one pip combined with Saber Throw. There are some gimmicks you can use with Dooku. I'll put him in the low S here. Dooku also suffers from the fact that why would you take Dooku when you can take Ventress? She's just a better overall missile, which is what Dooku generally wants to be doing. He will generally try to tie up any other units and start whittling down high priority units while trying to control the battlefield around him. But he is very points intensive, and there's nothing he can really do that Ventress and maybe a different Ventress and Maul together, or Ventress and any other combination can't provide for you. He is still a very good pick for veteran players, and you do see him crop up in a lot of higher skilled lists, because he's a very good anti-Jedi as well. Even though he has a low attack pool, he's more reliable at getting those damage through. So maybe if you chip you're an enemy Jedi, and then he can come in and finish off. I think he averages around 2 wounds to most Jedi. Most Jedi will have Into the Fray or something on them, so they'll be surging to defend back into him in any way when they do that defense. So you'll probably get 2 over. So it's a lot of points for very minimal wounds. He's definitely in a good player's hands. You need to be going for the more ball control and messing with your opponent's units more than the actual kill pressure with him. B2s, definitely S, and they're above Count Dooku. B2s are simply the best core unit in the game. Even compared against the B1s or any other unit, to be honest, they're better than most special forces as well. With the 2 health and being able to saturate and just bulk standard unit with a heavy in there, you're talking on average, I think it's 8 wounds total. So you're talking, if you're just rolling without cover or anything, you're talking at least 16 hits to chew through the unit. That's nothing to snuff at. Incredibly resilient. Unfortunately, they did get a bit nerfed with the repair bot changes and repair bots costing so much. A lot of people would argue that's more just keeping them, made them a bit more fair, because everyone just spammed the repair bots everywhere back in the day. But the B2s also suffer from that they aren't cheap. If you are investing into them, you're going to take 3 of them. You're talking over 300 points just for 3 activations, which in Separatist is quite a bit. It's BXs with a full kit can cost 100 and something. But you pay for those points with the wounds and being reliable, and they're a reactive and proactive unit. They can move and shoot, they can run into melee and shoot, they don't have very many weaknesses. Big squads of these you don't really see yet. The meta hasn't shifted to that yet. However, me personally, I have been experimenting a little bit with B2 super squads, or at least one squad, but they suffer as the same thing. You really need to be taken, if you're doing gimmicks like that, you need like Ruthless or some way to get an extra move action, or maybe a snail tank to help shoot them up the board a bit, because they do suffer without having that extra activation to try and, or extra movement to try and engage, because people just play around the range 2. The AAT battle tank. This thing is an easy A, very high A. It's almost an S. It's high velocity. People always underestimate it and think it's, in a newer player's hands, the AAT is quite terrible. The AAT doesn't have a really high dice pool. It really needs to select its shots well, or go after targets that it's designed to kill. A good example of this is simply just your go-to on it is going to be link targeting array, armor-piercing shells, and high-velocity shells. And this thing, turn 1 is going to come in and try and do the high-velocity trick. Anything that likes dodges, clones, rebels, hell, even some Empire units like to have some dodges. You're going to try and strip that defense away and then bombard them with this. It wants to go after high priority units. It's not there to kill core or large squads, it's going to go after your special forces. If there's a hero who can shoot, it's going to take that hero shot with that high velocity shot. And then after that, it's going to go armor hunting with its armor piercing shells, and then each turn it's going to switch between those two targets. It's also one of the only counters to clone commandos, being able to take, put it in a good spot where it can shoot the clone commandos and just fire its main cannon twice. Since it's two different attack actions, it can, if you get lucky, you can get around the commando's armor, and it gives a lot of versatility. It is perhaps one of the only units in the game that I can think of that when you add it to your list, it really takes your list into more of an all-comers list, because suddenly you have a big tank, you've got a lot of firepower that can take on heroes and special units. You've got impact inbuilt, the main cannon, it's got critical, it's also got I think it's impact 4, main cannon has 1 with armor piercing shells, so it really just adds to a list. But your list should never be based around it. It should be an addition to a weakness in your list. That's, say, if you don't have enough impact in your list or something like that, or if you decided to take 3 droidicas, so maybe now you need some form of impact, so you'll take this in your list, or some long range line of sight blocking stuff. Like it's got a very unique purpose, and veteran players will find that unique purpose for the AAT. BX Commando Droids. BX Commando Droids are a easy S, and they would rank just above Dooku, but below B2s. Most times you're going to see these guys with vibro swords. They're gonna scout, double move, and try and charge something if you get a bit cocky and too close to them. However, don't dismiss the sniper build. The sniper build still really hurts. These guys crank out a lot of dice, and with the new exemplar on the super tacticals and new ways to get aims and all this other stuff, we got the strike team leader new upgrade. There can be some shenanigans with like special forces, maybe Ventress is near them. There's a lot of jankiness with them as well, with the jump action, being able to maybe shoot and then jump backwards and hide, so they stop themselves from getting out of the clapback. They are incredibly fragile. That's their one weakness for people trying to counter them, or at least advanced players will know of. They're very susceptible to be chip damaged, and each one that you lose does hurt quite a bit, because you're losing 2 white dice with surge to hit every time you lose one. It hurts more if you're with the vibro swords, because you start losing a lot of red and a white every time one dies, so perhaps tenacity there if you're trying to mitigate it a little bit. But don't shy away from either build. With advanced players or beginner players trying to get more skilled, definitely play around with each one. I personally, as I rather take Magna Guard as my melee block, play more of a rear guard, kind of like a back area where I wait for people to charge in, and keep these guys to my snipers, because I am so sick of versing clones and not killing anything, so the snipers on these guys are very helpful. Alright, we have the Stab Riders. Stab Riders did get the new upgrade with being able to get the extra move action. Now they can move around, however they are still terrible. Everything they stacked up against in their own support slot, with spider droids, crab droids, droidicas, they're just not worth it. They're still very expensive, even with the points drop, and then you got to reinvest the points anyway into that upgrade if you want it. And they're incredibly fragile, even compared to other speeders. Don't be tricked into thinking that Agile is going to be doing anything. You'll never see these guys in a super competitive list. Maybe some janky veteran list might try to take them and get one over on people with it, but it's generally not going to be there. Unfortunately, they still need a lot of love. Personally, if I had to change them, I would be like, if they do a move action, they go up to a red save. That would make at least speeders a little bit more playable, and a little bit not, I just move on, do my one thing, and then I die. And critical 2, don't fool yourself, that's not really doing much anyway. Chucking 6 blacks, it's just not enough. Alright, so we have Maul next. Maul is A tier. Very high A, almost S. The one thing that stops Maul from being a S tier is the fact that he requires setup. So you need to activate Geo form. You need that third action. Me personally, I generally play that card turn 1. The simple threat of being able to infiltrate Maul, burst of speed onto the board anywhere, very much just controls the flow of the battle, and you just hold him turn 1. It can suck, generally, if you end up going last because of that, if you're only 10 actions or something. But if you're playing an 11 or 12 act list and you're going last anyway, you basically just control the battlefield, because nobody really wants to give more in turn 1 to start doing damage on them. And if your opponent can easily forget about it, if they're maybe newer and not as experienced, even if you tell them about it 9 times out of 10 in a tournament environment, they're going to forget about it, and you'll get that charge in, and everything is just uphill from all since then. If he's in there, he's already done damage turn 1, and now he can move on to other units, and turn 2, if you pack force push, otherwise you're probably killing that other unit, or he's safe, he's buried in there, and your opponent has to, maybe they have to just sacrifice that unit. But yeah, definitely a very high A. He's very simple to play. He's a missile. He's very easy to misplay, I should say, as well. If you pull the trigger too early and somebody still has a counter unit ready for him, or standbys or whatnot. However, if you're messing around with your opponents and making them take standbys or messing with their movement turn 1, that's generally a win-win. The T-Series Tactical Droid. This thing is in C tier. Unfortunately, the Super Tactical Droid suffers that if you're buying not the Super Tactical, sorry, the T-Series Tactical Droid suffers that if you're going to take it, why aren't you taking Super Tactical? Especially when the Build-A-Bear ones come out, you're just going to take the Build-A-Bear one and go back to our old favourite, Mr. Super Tactical Droid from the old unnamed one. Or you're going to go, in the new Spider one with a giant gun on it and have a new gunboat hero guy. But generally, I don't know the specking on these guys yet for the new Build-A-Bear ones, but this guy's kind of falls by the wayside. You can see him in some obscure lists with Dooku and Max Magna Guard, the old rockets and stuff like that. Some people have been experimenting with those lists in the new rules, but generally you're not going to see it anymore. He's too flimsy, he's going to die too easily. Keep him for upgrades inside squads. B2 is very good, gets a surge and an extra red dice for an attack. It's not too bad. Sith Probe Droids. Sith Probe Droids are in the Bs. They're probably a middle B too. These guys are good to just round out a list. If at the end of the day, if you're cutting points down and you're 3 points off, maybe taking an extra activations, these are your go-to. These guys aren't going to do much for you in the game, but what people do tend to forget is that they do have hover. They do have, they can be quite quick, and they can have infiltrate off Maul's card because of detachment. They're a good little piece with incognito to be able to, maybe you don't need to score this objective because you're already capping 3 others, so you just put them on it and don't score it until you need to. So it can take a lot of pressure off the later rounds because you're like, oh, I got that unit over there. I wouldn't be dirtying your aura pool for them if you're going for an auto control kind of Separatist list. That's not really, a good trade-off. So if you can, cut a few more points and maybe squeeze in some more B1s, I'd probably do that. But the Sith Droids do have a place. It's just an obscure place, and obviously being tied to Maul is a bit sad, but it is what it is. But if you're taking Maul and you can squeeze these guys in, they're generally a no-brainer. But their biggest competition would just be more B1s, basically. Magna Guard, easy S. They are above Dooku simply because they can go in a variety of lists. And that they can very easily one-clap a Jedi if people aren't too careful with them, or able to stand up to, maybe ARC troopers and stuff as well. 2 wounds each, I'll probably even put these, like I said, personally, I prefer Magna Guards over BXs, so this is a personal choice. I'll put them above BXs in the S tier. There's one of the lists I run down at the GT down here in Queensland was, max B2 or B2s with 4 Magnas with Grievous back in the day. It's just mass 2 wound saturation with red saves. There was repair bots and whatnot in there. They are a very good all-rounder unit. Don't be deceived. Their shooting is pretty good. So, if you have to stay on objective, you do have to shoot. It's not bad. Their upgrades, unfortunately, you just take the generic upgrade just to have the extra dude 9 times out of 10. With the new rules, with how withdrawing works, the whip does have a place now. It didn't before until they FAQ'd it, being that, it still reduces your speed down to 0 because you can't withdraw. Magna Guard definitely have a place in every Separatist list. It'd be hard to say there's not a list that couldn't be improved by taking Magna Guard. Let's just say that. They are definitely a solid pick. Advanced players, this is where you're going to be looking to make up. They threaten at range 2, they're really hard to kill, and if you bring repair bots, they're even more annoying. Super Tactical Droid, I believe this is, I want to say this is Kraken. Yeah, it's Kraken. Kraken, sadly, doesn't really have a place. He is low C, high D. I'll just put him down in high D. You're not going to see him in any super competitive lists. He can be good as like an extra, like, threat saturation piece, depending if you're playing a skew list. Like I said, I used him in that B2 Magna spam list I had. I don't see any other way out unless you're playing jank with him. He just unfortunately doesn't stack up to everyone else in that role, and the lack of direct really hurts him, and he doesn't have enough offensive potential to be worthwhile. Alright, so we've got Kalani. Kalani is an easy S. He is... put him... Jeez, it's pretty much... I'm going to put him in high S, above the B2s for now. He will drop once the Build-A-Bear heroes come in. So you're just going to see him in, basically every single Separatist lists that wants auto control or wants to, abuse some aims out onto tanks or, Droidekas or whatever with Exemplar and strategize. He is just a synergistic piece for Separatists, and he's a linchpin. Basically, every list is going to have Kalani in it. I struggle to see a list that doesn't have Kalani. Sometimes, if you're running Dooku, you don't have Kalani because now, obviously, Dooku has direct. But it really depends on what the rest of the meat and potatoes of your list are. He's in 90% of lists, and if you're a beginner player looking at this video and you want to, you haven't been using Kalani, or you have been using Kalani and you don't like him, it's because you're not using him correctly. Kalani is by far one of the best units, probably in this entire faction. He can go, generally you're going to go first. He allows droid players, what they love to do is to stall out their turn. So they don't have to go with their important units first, they just go with Kalani first, stack up a whole bunch of tokens, get those units ready, like say an AAT or say crab droids or something, get them the tokens they need to be able to do the next clapback for anything your opponent shoves up into objectives. He's a very good unit. Dwarf Spider Droids. Spider Droids are an easy B. You used to see these things everywhere, but the nerfs to Ion, the points increase, we're paying a 600 point tariff on bloody Ion guns now. This thing, unfortunately, has fallen by the wayside. There used to be a very good gun line list, but these things don't generally like to move around too much, and the game's about getting on objectives now. They're competing with crab droids and droidekas. Droidekas, want to move onto objectives very quickly, very easily. Crab droids can get on objectives very easily with scout and moving, and they have melee and shooting threat. And the crab droid gun kind of outshines this gun, the Ion gun, simply because the crab droid gun has, I think it's impact 2 or 3. The dwarf spider droid, yep, but it has a worse dice pool than that gun, and is more reliant on tokens to do its job. However, there is still a place for these in lists. If you definitely don't want to take, you're like, oh, I'm lacking impact, and maybe you don't need scout, or you got heavy B2s or something like that. You're like, oh well, this would make a really good gunboat. They do, especially when there's 3 of them. They can annihilate most armored units in the game and not have to worry about them because you just stack a million iron tokens all over the board. There's no room for the laser cannon. That goes in the bin until they change it or do something with it. It's just if you're taking the spider droid, you always upgrade to the ion gun. There's a place for the flamethrower, but as a one-off, maybe you're like, oh, I got the points, I'll throw a spider droid and chuck engagement protocols on it, so I don't need to give it orders for it to move, and chuck a flamethrower on it, and it just goes hunting big squads. That's all it does. It's not an unreasonable unit, and it's definitely middle of the pack. The snail tank. The snail tank is definitely another very close to a high B to a low A. I'll put it in high B. They're in SKU lists. Generally you see 1, you see 2, especially in EXD droids, experimental droids. The new door gunners is very interesting because snail tanks can take that. So I think it takes their dice pool up to like an insane degree of like 12 dice or something stupid. And being able to pump out a whole bunch of different suppression and stuff just from shooting these guns, surge to hit. They benefit from Kalani with more tokens. Generally, you're going to take the precise on these guys. Every aim you're re-rolling 4 dice because you got precise 2. These are very good gunboats. Unfortunately, what lets them down is their keywords. All their guns, unless you're counting their ordnance, which you might have to recover, they're very limited in their keywords. So an AAT will have way more impact in this thing. An ATSD shooting this thing is going to have a field day because it can't really hit back very well. Little gun does have ion, but it's generally not going to come into play very well. So just keep that in mind, that the snail tank is very ordnance dependent on how you spec it. Pike Syndicate, put simply, they're below stab droids and D tier. You've got the best core in the game between B2s and B1s. Why are you even looking at mercenaries? These guys have 0 place in a separatist list. They probably shouldn't even be there until they fix mercenary troops in general, without having to be reliant on taking their commanders to actually function well to get enough out of them. You don't want to be taking these guys. So the capo's down there, even below them. Black Sun, again, they contest that core slot, and if you're taking Black Sun, why aren't you taking B2s? They're just better. Yes, these guys can pack more of a punch, and if they don't want orders to get their independence. But again, most separatist lists want that order control, want to be able to dictate what they can take out of the bag. You don't want to have a whole bunch of core sitting in there with commanders and operatives and being like, I don't know what I'm going to get. So unfortunately, the only reason these guys are not in D, they're in a very low C, is simply because they're able to hit so hard. But again, you probably should be using B2s. The Vigo, you're never taking that. That's low D as well. You don't need to help buff these guys with anything. Bosk, sadly, in the right hands, Bosk can be very good. He is a gun platform, but he will die to any concentrated fire pad. Don't be fooled into thinking Independent Surge 2 is going to do anything for him. And regeneration. This guy can just die to one shot. In particular, if an AAT decides to shoot its main cannon twice at him, he's probably dying. I'll put him in a low B to a high C. This guy can be elevated to an A ranking in the right hands, in the correct list. I have to stress that it has to be a list built with him in mind, where he's helping, doing the last chip damage or nuking a squad with his laying in wait things. But it's very niche and very, not many people play him at all. Cad Bane, unfortunately, low C to almost to a D. He has some play still with being able to. There's a few objectives he can do without revealing himself still, I think. And what lets him down is now we no longer have comms relay. So you got to give this dude an order. He never wants orders. It flew in the face of his play style. So we'll wait for the new upgrades to come through. When they come through, I'm guaranteeing we're going to see some kind of order mitigation, because that was such a core part of his gameplay. And you're just not going to see him outside a few janky lists. Ventress, easy S. Now, Ventress will just go below Magna Guard here, or above BXs yet. Ventress is incredibly good in that the fact that she can threaten any Force user in the game. She can threaten anyone who's impervious, like ARC troopers or Mandos and stuff like that. And she has such a high attack pool and able to manipulate her own dice. And don't forget, you can also manipulate her dice with the exemplar of, say, Kalani. And Kalani gives out aims and dodges, so you can double dip. Now, the best loadout for her is Burst of Speed, a staple to her, with Saber Throw, so you can make use of Relentless if you need to. In her training slots, you're going to take Into the Fray, and then if you really want to like splurge on her, don't be fooled into taking offensive and defensive stance. You want to be able to use exemplar aims and whatever like that. So that last training slot, personally now, I use as strike team leader to buff up BX commandos or Magna Guard, because you can give them maybe 2 dodges, one from retinue, one from her. That's personally how I run her now. She's a lot more versatile, doesn't die as quickly because, with deflect changes and that now. But she is also very fragile. You do have to keep that in mind. So I like to use her as a 1-2 punch. I'll get Magna Guards in there first, wait for them to try and, move something to deal with the Magna Guards. Then I'll jump Venturous in, or, position her to a point where you can dive into a unit that's already activated and you don't want to be taking too much damage with these guys. Geonosian Warriors. Geonosian Warriors are a low C. Unfortunately, they struggle in the fact that there's already so many really good core choices, and like, why are you taking Geonosians if you could take B1s or B2s? They are in skew lists, and basically skew lists only. You might see 1 or 2 naked squads running around, because obviously moving 3 times is very good for capping objectives with very specific needs in mind. These guys need a little help, to be honest with you. They are a good unit. Like, don't get me wrong, everything on them, if they were in any other faction, they would be an auto take. If they were in Rebels, you'd take them. If they were in Gar, you'd take them. If they were in Shadow Collective, you'd take them. If they were in Empire, you'd take them. But simply because there's B2s and B1s, you don't take them. That's the sad fact about them, unfortunately. Sunfac, even with points reduction, he's above these mercenaries, but he's D. Him and Poggle suffer from the same thing that, I guess we'll wait to discuss Poggle. Sunfac, very good with other Geonosian Warriors, obviously, with his command card, plus his, direct and all that. However, main issue is he's just not offensively threatening. He's just another objective piece, and if you're already taking Geonosians, you already have a million objective pieces, so why are you bothering? Poggle suffers from not knowing his own identity. He doesn't know if he likes droids or if he likes Geonosians with his command cards. His 1-pip is friggin' useless because, somebody like sneezes in his general direction, he's going to die. This guy needs so many other units to even try and make him work that it's pointless. And his Magna Guards surrounding him, so nobody can ever charge him. So by that I mean, Magna Guard in base contact with Poggle, so nobody can actually make base contact with him. It's retarded. You don't take Poggle. You can see him in some skew lists, like I said, where he can shine, like with Geonosians. But 9 times out of 10, unless there's a very veteran player with a very specific use for those cards that he has, you ain't taking him. Crab droids. These guys are an easy A, and I'm going to rank them above Maul. They're going to be at the top of the A list. Crab droids are very unique in that they are very much like Kalani, where they are a totally synergistic piece, but they can also pack quite a punch. They do everything. They give another unit scout. They can have an impact gun. You're always taking that impact gun because, 2 or 3 of these guys covers your impact needs for the entire game. You don't need to worry about anybody else. You're taking the impact gun. I personally run engagement protocols on these guys, while the precise thing could, some people look into it. I don't think it's necessary. You're generally going to get 3 hits, maybe exemplar and aim across. You don't need anything more than that. So just engagement protocols, make sure they can always move without an order, because 9 times out of 10 these guys aren't getting orders. They are red saves. They do have some armor. They also have pierce and melee. Never forget about that. It's definitely acceptable to be just double moving and smacking somebody in the face the next turn with the crab droid. Nobody expects the crab droid punch. It does hurt really hard, especially I think it's a rainbow with an extra red. It's definitely a very good unit, and definitely a synergistic piece. However, the one trap with things with Separatist lists in general, just veteran players will know this, is that you over synergize. You put too much synergy in, and then you don't have enough power to get through certain units. So just be careful with crab droids. I'd probably be running 2. 3 is probably overkill unless you have something very unique in mind, but you should only ever be taking them if you have a very specific use for that scout. it could be a Geonosian list to increase the Alpha Strike. It could be B2s to get them up there with a Ruthless to give them, a little bit more punch, a little more range on their punch. They're very specific uses here. Aquadroids, currently they are Super S. I'll put them just below Magna Guard simply because in most lists you take Kalani, you take B2s, you take some Magnas, and then you look at adding Aquas. Aquadroids, I'm sure everyone's played them by now or come against them. Moving terrain, Sith love them, all Dooku, Ventress, Maul, all staging posts behind them. Can shield B2s from taking attrition damage, and they have a very deceptively reliable dice pool. Shooting is not to be snuffed at, and combined with crab droids, incredibly good at adding extra impact into your army to deal with more tanks. So don't be deceived, these things are incredibly good, and as a veteran Separatist player myself, I can tell you with 100% certainty, these guys are either going as your last activation, unless you plan to hide something behind them, in which case they are going second last when they deploy. The idea is to stop the attrition on these guys. The longer they have more models, the longer somebody has to hold something to deal with them, the better your game plan is. So these guys, second last, if not last, every activation for turn 1. If you really want to go with them early turn 2, you can, but generally you want to go with the unit that's staging behind them if that's the case. These guys, 100% if you're a Separatist player, doesn't even matter if these guys go up 30 points, you're still taking them. They are pivotal to how Separatists play currently. Alright, Hondo. Hondo, unfortunately, is just D tier. Look, I'll put him in a low C. His shenanigans that he has with same pips and stuff. Separatists don't really want to be trying to play that game with them. At the moment, Hondo wants to dictate your command cards because you want to try and match and get to that, whereas Separatists usually have a game plan from turn 1 to turn 5 of every exact command card they're going to play for what situation. So you don't want to be messing around with stuff. He doesn't really gel with the rest of the faction. And you know what? I'm going to put him in D. It's just, flies in the backwards of the one. He can be above stab riders, though, because you might see Hondo more than you see stabs. So that is unfortunately Hondo. He just flies in the face of what a Separatist player wants to do. Alright, and that brings us to the end of the event. So I hope this, combined with the beginners and now this advanced tier list, really helps the development of Separatist players. And we'll get to the other factions as well. If everyone's been wondering about Empire, I'm holding out for the High Command pack because that just fundamentally will change how Empire plays. Other than that, just remember guys, experience outranks everything, so get out there and play some games. Take care.